right, let's get a check on the commodities market now and what's playing out in the refining and sale of petroleum products. That's our top conversation right now. We have Mr. Bismarck Rewane, MD CEO of Financial Derivatives Company. Great to have you on the show, sir. Good morning.
Good morning, Ladi.
So, yeah, it's all about the Naira for crude deal, and we're all waiting, patiently for that deal to commence. But, so far, what has been the benefits, of the Naira for crude deal? What benefits have we seen or maybe not noticed, so far with the deal?
Okay, this agreement has been in place for the last 6 months. And in 6 months, let's go back and see exactly what has happened. In 6 months, there's been guaranteed supply. There's been quality guaranteed. There's been almost uniform pricing across the country. And more than anything else, there's been no cacophony about subsidy and deficits. So you have a system that works and a market that works. But the most important thing to note is that, one, the oil market is not like a Jankara market. People plan forward, they buy forward. And if on March 31st, this transaction or this particular negotiation does not fall in place, what will happen is that the Dangote group will have to go into the market at that time to start buying. And if by this time, today, the 20th of March, there's nothing concrete in place, it means that the country runs the risk of having a gap without any white products available for about almost a month before we settle this. So the old saying that you must do the right thing at the right time is very important here. Dangote is buying crude now, making arrangements to buy crude in dollars, and has its revenues in Naira. So there's a mismatch. There's a currency mismatch. There's also an interest rate mismatch. And then there's also the mismatch of supply into the refinery. So all of this is sorted out. The federal government of Nigeria has actually said and made it clear that we have this thing, we have this arrangement, and we let it run for 6 months. But it doesn't have to get to the 6th month before we start renewing the transaction. So that if everybody has to go their own way, federal government of Nigeria has to look for new buyers of its crude. Dangote has to look for new suppliers for its crude to get its refinery running. You cannot, refinery is not like a light bulb that you just put off and on. So I think that is the most important thing. The mentality of running a country, like we are running a market, supermarket, is not the way to go. But also, we must note that that since this announcement that there's a suspension of this, you've seen queues, you've seen anxiety. And you asked the first question that what has been the benefit? The benefit to Nigeria for this arrangement was that Dangote was able to supply constantly. He's been able to establish that the amount of petrol that is used, PMS used in Nigeria, is nowhere near the 70 or 80 million liters which we're talking about. It's more like 30 to 35 million liters. The figure is yet to be established. But also that the rate of inflation has come down because logistics cost, which is a major component of cost of production and cost of distribution in the country, has come down. One, the people are short of supply. Two, the price of this product was coming down. And then the knock-on effect on the economy as a whole has become very clear. So what am I saying? It's a good thing for Nigeria and it's a good thing for Dangote, it's a good thing for NNPC. Now, but do not forget that once bitten, twice shy, that some time ago, the NNPC decided to take an option of 20% of the equity in the Nigerian, on the Dangote refinery. When it came to time to crystallize this and exercise that option, they didn't exercise the option. So Dangote, who had made arrangements based on the understanding that Nigeria will come forward with its own share of the equity, had to go elsewhere to sort out this thing. So it left Dangote in a precarious financial position at that time, feeling because they had a lot of muscle and financial muscle, they were able to meet their obligations without the refining grounding to help. Now, NNPC has 7% stake in the refinery, right? And therefore, it's obligated to come to the table, one, as a partner, two, as a supplier, three, as a buyer, and to ensure that there's no disruption to the, to the lives of Nigerians and the economy of Nigeria. It is
I
the
guess
responsibility.
the NNPCL is also a competitor, with this market. But let's imagine now that the Naira for crude deal is not renewed. What are the implications for the Naira?
No, first and foremost, if it's not renewed, it's bad for Nigeria and bad for everybody. Dangote will buy crude from elsewhere, buy in dollars, still only that it's paying in dollars. So there'll be a demand for dollars more. But then Dangote would have no choice but to start pricing accordingly. Because right now, there's a currency risk and there's a supply risk. So first of all, he will get supply from elsewhere, and he will be paying in another currency, and he's having to sell the products in Naira. So there's a mismatch between the currencies. There's a mismatch in the supplies. There's a mismatch in the balance sheet and the borrowing and the financing package, which Dangote and Nigeria, for that matter, not just Dangote, Nigeria, for that matter, will have to suffer that consequence. Therefore, it's not a simple, it's not a very simple situation. It's quite complex, and therefore, we must appreciate that if we are doing business with a Nigerian entity who is willing to buy the crude in Naira and willing to supply the market and sell in Naira and has been bringing down the price, we need to jump at it. If we allow it to slip after us, then we are going back to where we were before. And what did we have before? Because we had queues, we had quality issues, we had situations where logistics costs were high, and the level of macroeconomic stability that you find today will not exist. But I am optimistic, and I'm sure that based on what I've read about the Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy has intervened, Mr. Adedeji, who is the chairman of FIRS, all of these guys know, they know and will do everything possible. The only thing is that, like I said, doing the right thing at the wrong time or doing the wrong thing at the right time comes to the same thing. Time is of the essence, and I think within the next 24 hours, this will be resolved.
Cases, with most market dynamics at this point, there's always winners and losers, in most of these markets with policy and all of that, with demand and supply. Who wins if this deal is not renewed?
I think this is a lose-lose situation. Whichever way we go, if this deal is not renewed, everybody loses. But more than anything, the biggest loser will be the Nigerian consumer. Dangote will source crude. There are people willing to sell crude to him. Dangote will process crude. Dangote refinery will sell its refined products. But there'll be a disruption to the process, which is not good for the country. So this is not about who wins or who loses. It's about a situation where everybody loses, only that some people lose more. The biggest losers will be the Nigerian consumers. The biggest losers will be the reputation of the Nigerian government for doing transactions with its own people and dishonoring its obligation. Don't forget that the world was watching when Nigeria NNPC reduced its option from 20% to 7%. If you add on to that the fact that we are now beginning to look dishonorable, then it becomes a problem. But I don't think it will get to that. To be honest with you, I think the deal will be renewed. This is a question of just going through the motions. I think that's very important. But more than anything, the Naira will weaken. And when the Naira weakens and the price of crude, price of petrol products increase, then you are looking at an inflationary environment, which is, we need that as much as we need a bullet in our head.
Right, and definitely we're hoping inflation continues the trend that we're seeing so far, and we can actually feel the impact at the markets. But we're seeing cocoa prices, they're rising at this point. What's stoking that?
Well, I think that some prices are beginning to increase because basically there's seasonality and there's a cost, and then there are these other factors, which is the rate of inflation, the rate of depreciation of the currency. But the currency has started going in the wrong direction again. But luckily, it's at around 1575. We've always said that the currency will settle between 1550 and 1600. So therefore, it's within that range of equilibrium. So we are not worried too much about it. What I think is very important is what happened in the Federal Reserve yesterday. that the Federal Reserve maintains status quo, but said something. The guidance that the Federal Reserve Chairman said was that he's expecting US growth to drop to 1.7%, right? And he's expecting inflation to be at 2.7%. Now, the inflation target is actually 2% for the year. And if this year the Federal Reserve is now saying that inflation will be at 2.7%, it means that we are unlikely to see a rate cut in the US in the near term. What does it mean? It means that the dollar begins to lose value in the markets. And also we are in a situation of stagflation. Stagflation is the worst economic situation where you're having slow growth and high inflation, which means that interest rates are going to remain high, and mortgage rates and mortgage costs to US citizens is going to be much higher. So we have to look at that. But for us, it really, we are neither here nor there, but the US economy is the largest economy in the world. And if the US economy stalls because of tariffs and the things that are happening in Gaza and in Ukraine, it means that the global economy will be facing these shocks, right? And those shocks will affect us in Nigeria. So let us assume that something happens, that the price of oil drops below where it is $70, it now goes to about 60 or 65. Yes, the cost of refined products will be lower, but in Nigeria's government revenue will suffer significant shortfalls. And therefore, when that happens, then the federal government resorts to ways and means, and the fiscal deficit comes under pressure. We don't want that, and we don't look forward to that. So we are also hopeful that the tariff, tit for tat and reciprocal tariff, will be short-lived, and that very soon, the next day or two, we would have a kind of truce, and therefore the price of oil begins to stabilize between 65 and 70. At that level, we can. But our production, the biggest problem is our production. You know the things that are happening, and that we've had force majeure. The Trans-Niger Delta pipeline has been affected. We don't need any more exogenous shocks. In addition to exogenous shocks, global exogenous shocks, we do not need endogenous shocks in the oil production of Nigeria. So we need to resolve our problems,
right,
to ensure that our production increases and the price remains stable. Then we can begin to enjoy the benefits of a stable economy.
You know, Mr. Rewane, looking at the global economy and the domestic economy, the first quarter of 2025 has been quite dramatic, you know, I must say, with the tariff tit for tat and all of that. So, you know, going by what's playing out right now with inflation and let's talk about the Naira for crude deal, how is all of that playing out in the domestic commodities market? Are we seeing any reduction in prices, or are prices still going higher?
Well, let me put it this way. There are lags between when things happen and when you see the impact. As we speak today, price of most commodities have come down, but three commodities in particular have increased. One is tomatoes is up, pepper is up, and we've seen a little bit of an increase in price of rice. So what do we see? We think that inflation remains stable. It basically stable for the next 2 to 3 weeks. But if, for example, the Naira for crude transaction is not renewed, you will see speculation kicks in again. I will begin to see prices begin to increase. But in the inflation numbers, two things came out clearly, and I said it to you on Tuesday. One is that core inflation has increased. Two is that the monthly inflation rate that was not announced is much higher when you annualize it than the annual rate of inflation. And if you are projecting forward, the monthly inflation rate is more relevant and more appropriate for projections than the annual rate, because you are comparing the price of rice in March 2024 with the price of rice in March 2025. But the monthly inflation compares the rate last month with the rate this month. And therefore, because of that, it's clear to us that the inflation trajectory in Nigeria today is fragile, which means that inflation can turn around very quickly and erode all the gains that we have made. So one, we shouldn't celebrate too early. Two, let's guard those things that make our inflation stable in Nigeria, which is one, the exchange rate. Two, the price of petroleum products. and 3, the amount of money supply. If we can guide those things, then we will have a stable next 2 months. But if we allow those things to slip away from us for any number of considerations, then it's going to be a very hard Easter coming to us. And that the month of March is for those of you who studied Shakespeare and Julius Caesar, we say, beware the Ides of March. That was when Caesar was told that some guys were plotting and that the horizon does not look too good. So every time we're in March, we say, beware the Ides of March, especially the 15th of March, which is the Ides of March.
Of March, and going by what we're seeing in the stock market so far, the month of March has been quite bearish so far, but we'll see if we get some kind of rebound. But thank you so much, Mr. Bismarck Rewane. Always great having your perspective as CEO of Finance.
Thank you for having me this morning.
Thank you for coming, sir.